This is my reflection on urban forestry, and I've got an outline here, so I won't just be rambling for 10 minutes. So to start on what I've learned this semester, this we've kind of touched on in classes besides just this capstone class, but we've talked about different organizations like the Nebraska Arborist Association and the ISA, and how you can become certified arborists through those. And although a lot of tree care companies value those certifications, it's unrealistic to think that every person who's going to be inventorying trees or assessing them has those certifications, such as in Waverly, they have a lot of volunteers doing that work. And I think that's where I struggled on my part of our final paper. So my group section, was the tree assessment. So I kept focusing on the ISA basic tree assessment report, but when I talk about that, I'm making a lot of assumptions that the people who are reading it have knowledge in forestry and know the terminology already, but that's just not true. So I really had to focus on trying to make it understandable for someone who doesn't have a background in forestry or arboriculture. Another thing we talked about that I didn't know was that forestry falls under the Farm Bill, and only in 2018, only 0.03% of the funds were allocated to community forestry, which also means that even if you did have a professional doing the assessment, you can't pay them that much. And using the ISA risk assessment, it takes it at least 30 minutes per tree from my experience, maybe a little faster once you've done it a few times. But if volunteers are doing that, they're not going to spend 30 minutes per tree assessing. So they need something that's a lot quicker and easier to understand. I also learned about diversity and how that should be picked more on a genus level than a species level, because a lot of pests target entire genuses. So if you have 20 different species of maples, okay, but what if a pest comes along and it prefers maples? Well, it's going to take out all of those maples. So you need to diversify it by genus. And on that note, I've also become very surprised by the amount of people who are unaware of EAB. I've been aware of EAB since high school because I grew up with an ash tree in my front yard and it had to be removed because EAB was in Illinois. So even before I became a tree person, I was very aware of emerald ash borer. But earlier this week, I had a friend post on Facebook that she posted the city came and removed a bunch of trees in our neighborhood and didn't tell us why. So I told her that it was probably from EAB because it's in Lincoln now, so they're going through and removing all the ash trees in the city, but she was completely unaware of EAB and that it was here. What else? How this all relates to management. I honestly feel like I already knew a lot of the management, like planting and maintenance and site selection, all that stuff, because we learned all of that in arboriculture. So I feel like it was kind of a repetition, and I understand why it's important, especially when you're talking about tree assessments, like was it planted properly? Was it planted too deep? Or is there proper pruning? Is there line toweling? Things like that. Or when it comes to the site, especially with street trees, like is it too close to the sidewalk? Is it too close to the street? Too close to a building? Things like that. We also even did risk assessments in arboriculture, so I feel like I was pretty familiar with that. How this applies to my career, well, since I'm going into tree care, this is very valuable information for me. Although this class specifically was more about municipal forestry, and I'm going into residential tree care, a lot of the same principles still apply. Like I was just talking about, site selection, even though it's residential, you still have to pay attention how close it is to the sidewalk or how close it is to your house or your driveway even. are like knowing if you have kids playing in your backyard, you have to make sure your tree is maintained so it doesn't cause a threat to your kids. What else? I guess what I'm specifically going to be doing is plant health care. So more like disease diagnosis, insect and mite treatment, and fertilizer. And I feel like this is one aspect that we didn't really touch on a lot throughout our forestry classes. Like we might have had a couple days in arboriculture that we talked about it, but I think that would be something I'd be more interested in. Potentially it'll be a part of the major, like taking an entomology class, but I think it would have been cool to actually like look at a tree and like go through the diagnosis of it and then how to treat it would have been really cool, and like determining whether it's like a nutrient deficiency or if something's caused by an insect. That would have been neat. Some of my favorite things that we've done throughout the class, I really like the activities that we do where I can apply the information from the class to something that's relevant in my life. So just this reflection alone has been something I've enjoyed because I got to think about how it's connecting to my career. Or last week when we did the information on the presidential election, it was cool to think about the information I've learned in this class, form my own opinions, and then see how that relates to presidential candidates. I also kind of have a love-hate with this one, with article reviews, because yes, it can be a lot of work to go through and read the articles and try and understand them, but when we actually talk about it in class and break down like the statistics of it, it's very helpful because a lot of things that I don't understand on my own, I'm able to ask questions about in class, and you're able to walk us through what it means. And then it's cool to like come out of class actually understanding the article and seeing how it applied to what we learned in class or how it applied to the statistics class that I took last year. I also liked this week we got to choose our own article for the article review, which was kind of cool to pick something that I was more interested in. One of the things that I've enjoyed about this class specifically was looking into the value of urban forest and all the benefits that trees provide to a city. So I found an article on how trees provide shade in cities, and that helps reduce like air temperatures, and then that reduces the need for electricity for air conditioning. I thought that was really neat. So overall, I love that all of your classes were really hands-on. I guess because of our situation this semester, we didn't get to do as much stuff outside, but in most of your classes we do. And if I'm being honest, in most of my classes, I will like sit and do other homework for my other classes, but this was one of the classes that I never did that. I actually paid attention through class and I was interested in what we were learning. So A+ for urban forestry.